All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Auburn post-game show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli. He's Matt Scalisi. I'm not sure if I even have the words, Matt, to even comment on what we just watched at Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, Alabama. Auburn beats Georgia State, the final score 34-24 in a game that Georgia State led for like 59 of the 60 minutes. The Tigers pull it out in the end with TJ Finley, the backup quarterback, leading Auburn on a 90-some yard drive, capped off by a 10-yard touchdown pass in the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Matt, your initial thoughts after the end of this game?
I mean, I have to say, I think there was a point somewhere in the second quarter where I became aware that this was not just Auburn screwing around and playing an ugly game that they were ultimately going to win. I really did genuinely become concerned that Auburn was going to lose the game in the second quarter.
Yeah.
And I think it looked more and more likely as the game went on. I will say that I started to get a little bit more of a glimmer of hope for Auburn, seeing how their defense played in the second half, which was really different. I think there's a very clear demarcation at halftime for how the defense played. And I don't know if that was, getting guys back who weren't there in the first half due to penalties from the Penn State game that we don't need to go back into. But
it was a huge change, though.
There's no question Auburn's defense played a lot better in the second half of this game. And I think that's what even put them in position. And Brian Harsin said the same thing at the end of the game. He said, if we don't get that punt block score for a touchdown, we don't even have a shot to win at the end of the game. So they did good things in special teams and defense in the second half of this game that we shouldn't take the attention away from. Yep. But obviously, everybody is going to be focused on what TJ Finley did on this last drive. Yeah. I think it's important and it is worth paying attention to because we haven't seen Bo Nix do that this year. We didn't see him do it last year either. We certainly all remember kind of how Bo Nix made his entrance at Auburn with a late come from behind win with a huge throw for a touchdown. And this reminded me of that feeling a little bit. Yeah. But I do think that what TJ Finley did on the final drive of this game was something different. I think regardless of how good his overall stat line is in this game, I think the fact that he stepped up in that situation in a game where there was a ton of pressure. We all know what those guys were out there thinking about. We can't lose to Georgia State. And he made the plays he needed. And the particular play really took a lot of heads up thinking. It took a lot of awareness of what was going on the field.
Yeah.
And I think it's something Auburn's been missing at that position.
I think that credit to going to go back to the defense quickly in the second half. Okay. The special teams play was a huge momentum booster and changer for Auburn a little bit, but it was clear that Brian Harsin knew there needed to be a spark offensively. When Auburn came out flat offensively again with Bo under center in the second half, he looked at his, he looked around and said, all right, we have to have a spark. And he said this in postgame, and I think it was pretty clear. I don't think it was a situation of, okay, we're going to replace Bo. We're going to see how this goes with TJ Finley. Puts TJ Finley in the game, hands the ball off, quite a few times, kind of gets him comfortable. And in the end, TJ Finley pulls it out, but he doesn't do it alone. And I think that needs to be a very clear thing. With that said, it seems as though that spark kind of resonated throughout everyone on the team. It seemed like guys were maybe blocking a little bit better. It seems like guys were maybe running a little bit harder. The defense stepped up. Guys kind of rallied around TJ Finley when he went into the game, Matt. And so there was a huge momentum shift. I felt like they still probably didn't get the offensive output they would have absolutely loved to in the second half. But at the end of the day, Auburn gets a win. There are a lot of scary things, and I think we're getting these comments here. People are afraid of what this team looks like going forward, and that's okay.
That's valid.
At the end of the day, Georgia State deserved to win that football game. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Georgia State deserved to win that football game late in that game. I don't care. I tweeted this. I don't care if you're an Auburn fan, a Georgia State fan, or a Steeling fan. That was Georgia State's game in the end with 1 minute to play. And Auburn comes out victorious. Great for Brian Harsin and company to be 3-1 right now and not 2-2. But again, it's just hard to put into words the finish of that game and what TJ Finley was able to put together in that final drive, going almost 100 yards for a touchdown.
I think for sure Georgia State played well enough to win the game. And I would also, though, point out that I think talent-wise, right, this is not supposed to happen. This is not supposed to be a situation that Auburn finds themselves in. We can make all the excuses we want about playing. I saw somebody mention playing Penn State last week and being kind of beat up, looking ahead to LSU. None of that stuff should matter. The talent differential between these two teams was massive, and that means that the effort differential in this game was massive in Georgia State's favor. And I think it continues to be baffling as to why Auburn's offense is having such a hard time engineering long drives down the field. It was amazing to see them do it at the end of the game, only because we'd gone the whole game and hadn't seen it happen. So it started
years and hadn't seen that happen. I mean,
years. Yeah, it started to feel like it was impossible. And I, honestly, the thing that if we want to get into this, kind of the other aspects of why Auburn was even in a position to lose this game, this running game for Auburn that we were so excited about a couple of weeks ago just dried up. It just wasn't there today. Jarquez Hunter with 62 yards on 10 carries it's not too bad of a figure, but Tank Bixby 18 carries for 60 yards. I mean, what happened? Where did the rushing attack go? Where did that physicality from last week go when things were going well? That was shocking to me, and I do think that part of the explanation could be that when the passing game is truly not there, when you don't have to respect it at all, because Bo's not making good throws, because wide receivers aren't getting open, because the offensive line can't protect him.
Yeah.
You can send everybody. You can tee off on the run. And I think even a team with inferior talent can stop these great running backs that we know Auburn has if they know they don't have to worry about the passing attack. And I think that alone, to me, is a sign that something has to be done to make Auburn's passing attack more dynamic. And I think that's probably why Brian Harsin made the decision he made, because it was very obvious at a certain point in this game the passing was not there, and it wasn't going to be there with Bo Nix at quarterback today.
When Auburn gets dominated in the first half in the trenches by Georgia State on both sides of the ball, that's a problem, because I can promise you they're going to see a heck of a lot better guys up front with teams in the SEC than they're going to see in the guys that they saw today when it comes to Georgia State. I think not only what you just said, credit to the running game, and they're not credit, but issues with the running game, but issues with the run defense. I mean, it was ridiculous what Tucker Gregg, who is Tucker Gregg? Well, he's going to be remembered on the Plains for a hot minute now. Tucker Gregg puts up 150 yards, and it felt like he put up about 350, but Auburn allows 267 on the ground to Georgia State. And that, and granted, McClain was out in the first half, and it was completely different in the second half for the most part when he was in there, kind of one of the leaders of that defense. He was able to just be more solid there in the second line for Auburn's defense. But good God almighty, I mean, like, I don't care who's in there. An Auburn defense isn't going to allow a guy to run through them like that. That 50-yard touchdown run, Matt, I was shook when I saw that. I was shook.
A fullback just blowing everybody away out of nowhere is not a thing you want to see. 267 yards rushing. I mean, Auburn hasn't given up anything close to that this year on the ground. This was, I think we have to at least partly credit Georgia State for having a good game plan and finding a weak point in this Auburn defense, but that's not great to see. I mean, This is not the most physically imposing offensive line Auburn is going to face this year by a long shot. I mean, the non-conference season ends today, and arguably every single game left on this schedule is going to have more physical players on the line of scrimmage than any of the 4 games Auburn has played so far. So that is absolutely concerning. I've seen a lot of people talk about the defense and how, it shouldn't take these adjustments, but I do agree it should. There's reasons to feel both here, right? I mean, I think the fact that they were able to adjust in the second half and play so much better is a good thing, but man, it shouldn't have taken it. It shouldn't have ever been a situation where Auburn needed to rally from behind late in the fourth quarter to beat a team of this caliber. I think with the schedule ahead and the more that we're seeing the SEC kind of take shape right now, this is a conference that this year, more than last year even, I would say, is built on a lot of really big physical teams on Auburn's schedule. I mean, you've got Arkansas out there waiting. You got Alabama. You got Texas A&M still, even though they took a hard loss today. We know they've recruited well. I think that drastic measures were taken to avoid a disastrous loss today. But there are going to have to be more drastic measures taken over the course of the season to keep this Auburn team competitive in the SEC, I think.
Yeah, appreciate all of your guys' comments. And I want to pull one up here from Josh Corbett, who says, Owen and McClain out in the first half. The backup's not as talented. Okay, you're right. You're right, they're not. But when you want to win in the SEC, you have to have depth. You have to have depth. And I understand Brian Harsin is trying to establish depth right now on both sides of the ball. It's his first year. You're not playing Georgia. You're playing Georgia State. And if you don't have depth enough to stop a guy like whatever the heck his name is for Georgia State, I can't even remember what it is, Tucker Gregg. You're going to have some issues trying to stop guys like Brian Robinson in the Iron Bowl. If you do not have the proper depth that you need, again, I understand that the depth has to be built. And that's fine, Josh. You can say that I'm an idiot. I'm good with that. But it's a problem. It's a problem when that is allowed. Guys out or not, you want to make excuses, have at it. I can promise you who's not going to make excuses, and that's Brian Harsin.
I think that for sure leadership on this defense on the field is very important. I mean, we saw the difference that it made from first half to second half. We saw what happened to Auburn's defense, frankly, when we had leaders leaving the field against Penn State. I think arguably it made a pretty big difference. Yeah. But again, like you're saying, Simone, that's not a great sign that one guy makes that much of a difference, because you can never build your entire unit around a single player. If you do, you're in trouble.
Appreciate you coming back, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's going to happen really more than anything else is other guys on this defense are going to have to start stepping up. Other guys are going to have to take on leadership roles too, and show some maturity. I think at a certain point, consistency has to be the goal for this defense, not living and dying off of huge plays, not, hey, maybe we can get a punt block and return it for a touchdown.
Yes.
It's gotta be, especially in a game like this, it's gotta be start to finish proving that you're the better team out there. Yep. And there are going to be some games left on the schedule where Auburn is the better team. Not a ton of them, but there are going to be some. And they have to play with more consistency in those games, or they're going to lose those games. Yep. So I think this has to come down to more than just individual guys making plays. True on the offense too. I think TJ Finley came in and did some great things at the end of the game, but this offense needs more than just a QB who can stand in the pocket under pressure and make throws. They're going to have to find leadership up front. They're going to have to get some receivers to start stepping up and making big plays.
Yeah. A lot of folks commenting on the quarterback situation. So I want to go back to that a little bit.
Yeah, let's go back.
Okay. Is there a quarterback controversy? In my opinion, yes. I think that there's a situation where you have a guy who has done some positive things for you in the past. Bo Nix, I'm not going to say he's a proven winner. Okay. I don't want to people don't get rallied up in the comments. He's not a proven winner, but he is solid. He is a solid quarterback. TJ Finley provided a spark. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make the decision on this. I will say credit to Brian Harsin for sticking with his guns in this game, because he continued to roll with TJ Finley in situations where folks on social media and even me a little bit I was thinking, all right, do you want to roll with this guy in his first meaningful snaps for Auburn right now and not put in the guy who we have seen make plays in the past in the SEC level in big games, win big games for Auburn? So I say credit to Brian Harsin for sticking with his guns, staying with TJ Finley, who goes 90-some yards, and on a 4th and 9, his last opportunity, escapes incredible pressure, does not take a sack, stands in there, makes an incredible play. I mean, Matt, is there a quarterback controversy in your opinion?
I don't think there's a quarterback controversy, because I think that it's very obvious that TJ Finley needs to start.
Look at you trying to get some Auburn fans on your side, Matt. I'm gonna call it like it is.
I do think that Bo Nix has an important and valuable track record, and I think he's been in situations that TJ Finley hasn't been in. And maybe they go to Baton Rouge next week, and we're all proven wrong. And TJ Finley had one great drive against Georgia State. Because look, I was with you for up until that drive. TJ Finley had not done anything in this game that overly impressed me. I thought that it didn't look like a substantial improvement over what the offense was doing with Bo Nix in there until the final drive of the game. So I think we have a very small sample size to work with. I also think that this Auburn offense is not working as is. I think it probably goes well beyond scheme and even talent. I think at a certain point, you have to find an emotional moment to build your team around. Mm-hmm. You have to get guys buying in and believing that they can be successful, especially in the first year as a new head coach. It's extra important for Brian Harsin to make sure that his locker room buys into what he's doing and believes that his decisions can lead them to success. Yes. So I kind of almost think that he almost has to do this and bet on himself and say, look, I think if we make a new dynamic here on our offense, that we can make this work. Bo is still here. He's still working hard in practice. He's still part of the offense. And we're not saying that he's never going to get back on the field. But for right now, why wouldn't you kind of stick with the hot hand? Why wouldn't you keep going with the guy that just made something happen when nothing else was happening?
I want to say this, Matt. I think hot hand is a good point. But I think this is such a critical moment for Brian Harsin already in his tenure at Auburn. Here's why. He has an opportunity to look to the future, and the future can be TJ Finley. Bo Nix likely gone after this year. I mean, just telling it like it is. There's a good chance he declares for the draft. There's a good chance he's out of here after this one. He's had 3 years on the Plains. If I'm Brian Harsin, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm making some tough decisions when it comes to, all right, am I trying to make a third-year guy who, has been a stand-up guy, an Auburn guy, check all the boxes, he's not a guy that embarrasses you off the field, all the things, or am I looking ahead because I want to start to build this program and give TJ Finley meaningful snaps as the quarterback at Auburn? And if I'm Brian Harsin, I think the latter is probably which way he's going to go. I think he knows this is a critical moment, and he has the opportunity to roll with TJ Finley moving forward and get this guy meaningful snaps going into SEC play.
I think that's a pretty interesting way to look at it. I do think that ultimately what Brian Harsin's sort of responsibility is to do whatever is best for the program long term. Yeah. And maybe it's even possible that Auburn might lose a game with TJ Finley at quarterback this year that they would have won with Bo. Just given, let's bring that up as a hypothetical. Yeah. It still doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision long term, as you said, to start building a team for the future. Yeah. This probably isn't a season where Auburn is going to win an SEC championship. So what's the goal? The goal is to eventually build this team into a championship contender. Mm-hmm. there's arguably a better chance of doing that with TJ Finley and building a team around him going forward. Yep. And it starts with getting him experience. Now, again, we're making a lot of snap.
Oh yeah, we're already planning this stuff for like years down the road at this point, Matt.
Yeah, but I do think that at a certain point, that's a thought that has to enter your mind. And I've seen a bunch of people bringing up Demetrius Davis too, who's the younger quarterback on the roster for Auburn. I think that there's kind of a fine line here, right? Because building for the future is one thing, but TJ Finley is a guy who has been playing at the college level, practicing at the college level for a couple of years. So it's not like you're going all in on an 18-year-old who was at homecoming this time last year.
Yeah.
This is a guy who physically is more mature and has more experience playing against SEC caliber players in practice. He was over there doing it against the kind of players he's going to be playing against next week, the exact players he's going to be playing against next week, actually.
Yeah.
So I think I get the wanting to go with the youth movement here, but I do think there's a pretty important distinction between TJ Finley and a young guy like Demetrius Davis.
Sure. And I think it's a pretty significant opportunity next week if Bryan Harsin puts his support, his confidence behind TJ Finley against LSU on the road. I think that would be an incredible opportunity for TJ Finley to prove himself, not only to these coaches, but to the guys around him who, in my mind, it seems as though they have rallied around him already. Matt, I understand there are tough decisions to make, and this is probably a hostile environment to go into. The emotions would be high for TJ Finley, but what an opportunity here.
I think more so, look, and I can't, we're not in the locker room. We don't know exactly what the bench was like. We don't know what the attitude of the other players on the team were when this moment happened. I can tell you from watching and from talking to my coworkers who were in the stadium, the atmosphere at Auburn was extremely hopeful and different when TJ Finley took the field.
You could hear it. I could hear it from Mobile.
Yeah, and
when
he scored that last touchdown, I mean, there are scenes, and you'll see video going up here on whatever page you're watching this on soon. I mean, that crowd bought into TJ Finley in that moment. They believe in him right now. I think that's significant. I think it's important to have a guy that becomes this kind of figure that people feel optimism about and feel hope in. Now, again, we don't know if that's the case for the rest of the roster, if that's what the locker room feels like. But if they're feeling anything like that crowd is feeling right now in Jordan-Hare, it's pretty – I would say that's pretty big motivation to try and start building the rest of the offensive game plan around TJ Finley and what he does well.
Yeah, I think that Auburn fans were excited when Gus Malzahn was let go, for lack of a better phrase, and they had new when it came to Harsin. I think that they're excited now that there was a change here at quarterback. They have new when it comes to Finley. There have been a lot of difficult days as an Auburn fan in the past, in the recent years, Matt, and I think that newness is a good feeling. I think that even if there is newness, and you said a second ago, when it comes to, we might lose a game with Finley down the road, but it's the forward thinking. It's what can things look like for Auburn. And we had a comment a second ago asking about Bo Nix's health. And I don't think this was a health situation. Josh, good question. I after the game, Bryan Harsin said that they needed a spark. And so, I mean, he pretty much confirmed that Bo Nix was replaced on the field because they were looking for a different look. They were looking for something different offensively. So what that looks like moving forward, I don't have the answers to that, but I don't think this was a health issue, Matt, when it comes to why Bo Nix did not take the field.
It's hard to know. I think, we did see him get banged up and have, obvious discomfort with his shoulder at Penn State last week. But to me, I still thought that his deep ball looked pretty good today. I mean, if anything, he was overthrowing guys, which it could potentially be a sign of an injury with his shoulder. But I don't think Bo Nix's issue is physical. I don't think it ever has been. I think that and I'm not even trying to 100% blame it on him, but I think that he stepped into a situation at Auburn that has never allowed him to have to create confidence and poise in himself. Maybe not even in his own skill and ability, but just in the offense around him to be where it needs to be, to protect him, for his receivers to be where they need to be. He's never looked comfortable there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's circumstances. Sometimes it's just the team you happen to land on at the given time that you happen to land there.
Yeah.
I think that you're right that newness is important. I know we're talking about these very vague concepts, but I think they matter. I think when you're talking about this sport, people's mentality, I mean, we hear coaches talk about this all the time, how important the mental side, the emotional side of the game is. And I think teams play better when they believe they can win, when they trust each other, when they believe in their teammates.
Yeah.
And I think this is a moment where Auburn needs to create that trust and that belief among themselves, among their own ranks. And I think if this is the moment that does it, we're not going to remember that it was against Georgia State. We're not going to remember that it was almost a really embarrassing loss. We're just going to remember that at some point, Auburn turned things around and started believing in TJ Finley. So maybe that's how this story goes, but we don't know. I would say that feels like a more likely ending to this story to me than Bo Nix suddenly becoming a different person and playing different football than what we've seen so far.
I think that's a great thought process there, Matt. I want to bring up a comment we got from James Waldrop a second ago. Both quarterbacks need to hit wide open receivers. Bo missed 3 in the first half. TJ missed 3 in the second half over their head. I'll say this about those two throws. I think that it's comparing apples and oranges a little bit, James, and here's why I do. I think that Bo straight up missed guys in the end zone, back of the end zone, just sailed these balls into the third row there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. TJ, I think he was a little amped up. I think that you overthrow guys because you get a little bit anxious, you get a little bit nervous maybe. Obviously he's in a situation where it's a tough spot. I mean, Brian Harsin put him in the game to turn things around. There's a lot of responsibility on a guy who's played very few snaps for Auburn to this point. So I think that Bo Nix has been in a situation in much bigger situations than what he was in at that time. So if TJ missing those throws, I really think maybe had a lot to do with still trying to figure out timing with guys and just being maybe a little amped up and excited in the moment. But at the end of the day, gets it done on a 4th and 9 play that will go down in history in Auburn. Not necessarily one they want to remember because you don't want to be in that situation. But hey, a historic play and moment nonetheless.
I think it's a look, sometimes when you're in danger and you find a way out of it, you get the same adrenaline rush you would get if something just all around great happened to you. Yeah. So that I think needs to, for Brian Harsin, for TJ Finley, for everybody on that team, they need to try and take this moment and this emotion that they're in and try and carry it forward. They have a hugely important game next week. It's a big opportunity for this program and for Brian Harsin. Yep. Going to Baton Rouge, to a place where they have not won in so long. And regardless of how good LSU is this year, regardless of whether the win looks good on a resume or whatever at the end of the season, it would mean something to Auburn fans to win in Baton Rouge. And this is an opportunity. This is a chance to get everybody on board with the Brian Harsin program and what he's trying to do. So we'll see if they can do it. I think if you're not, we had our friends from Tiger Takes on earlier this week, Allie and Lyndon, and they said, look, if you don't get this LSU team in Baton Rouge this year, I don't know when you're going to get them. Yeah, so
truth.
We'll see what happens. I think this is a very important week for Auburn football coming up.
It certainly is. Listen, it's a very important month coming up. Let's take a look at the schedule real quick before we let y'all go. At LSU, unranked LSU, still a rivalry game. At home against second-ranked Georgia. On the road, 16th-ranked Arkansas. At home against 13th-ranked Ole Miss. God knows the schedule does not get any easier. I said it during the pregame show. I read a statistic from Pro Football or something like that said Auburn has the most difficult remaining schedule in college football. That's nothing new to Auburn fans. They've been dealing with difficult schedules year in and year out. God knows that Gus Malzahn complained about it every single year. What is Brian Harsin going to do about it? And I think that we will see beginning next week, will TJ Finley be the guy?
And Dan, I just want to say in your comment here, stay tuned on this channel, on this YouTube channel. You're watching on YouTube, but if you're watching this on Facebook, we'll put it here too. We've got footage of that 4th and 9 play, and you will see it from our camera person's angle who was there on the field. That's coming up very soon here. So just keep an eye out wherever you're watching this right now.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning into the Auburn post-game show. The Tigers pull it out in the end, 34-24. If you didn't see what happened between the game starting at 0-0 to that, I suggest you go back and watch because you missed a lot. Who knows who will be the starter, who will be QB1 for the Tigers under Brian Harsin next week at LSU will be fun to watch. Will it be TJ Finley? Will it be third-year starter Bo Nix? We will find out. But, guys, thanks so much for tuning into the Auburn post-game show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone Eli. Y'all enjoy the rest of your Saturday night.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart